All right, everybody, it is 1 p.m. Hello. Better Spaces is a health and happiness solution for today's hybrid workplace. My name is Dr. Paul Kachoa, and I've partnered with them to bring you an easy and educational workday session. Today's session is CrossFit, balancing intensity and injury prevention. We'll explore the benefits and risks associated with CrossFit training, emphasizing the importance of proper form, scaling exercises, and recovery strategies to prevent overuse injuries. A little bit about me. I'm a owner and physical therapist of PAR5 Physical Therapy here in Randolph, New Jersey. And I got my doctorate from Mercer University in Dobbs Ferry, New York. And I have an exercise physiology BS from Rutgers University. I'm a certified orthopedic clinical specialist, certified golf medical professional and golf fitness instructor, and also a level 1 CrossFit coach. So if you're tuning in live or seeing this on the recorded on demand, make sure that you make this as helpful and informative as possible. Use the chat, email me. You could email me here at paul@par5pt with any questions. All right, so let's pull up my slides here. So here we are. CrossFit, balancing intensity and injury prevention. Now, because I'm a medical professional, I have to put up this slide because if you're dealing with something specific, make sure that you have your individual issues and dysfunctions assessed, thoroughly assessed with a physical exam from a medical professional so that you can treat all the associated factors that are connected to what your issues are. And the stuff that we're going to be talking about here is aimed at a broad population. It's nothing specific, it's just general advice, and it's not physical therapy. Alrighty, so the definition, let's jump in here, definition of fitness. So this means that fitness is measurable and can be calculated by plotting individual training scores, like the times, the amount of load that you're using, the reps, the number of reps, or the number of rounds that you do on a graph. So your work capacity across a broad time and mobile domains, that means that whatever you're doing in terms of the variety of movements that you're doing, and you could vary the movements, the times, and the exercises. This is kind of like CrossFit's definition of fitness. To be ultimately fit, you want to be able to work more and lift more and be fit and be strong and be able to have good health and wellness. So if we look at the definition of CrossFit, it's basically constantly varied functional movements performed at a high intensity. We vary the load, the reps time, the equipment, the movement, like I said earlier. And that's the definition of CrossFit. Now, they also describe the physical skills that CrossFit develops, and it covers a whole bunch of things here: cardiovascular, respiratory endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, power, coordination, agility, balance, and accuracy. So all these things, are included in what you work on when you're in a CrossFit class. Now, I'll say this to a lot of people as soon as I say CrossFit, people imagine this. They imagine the CrossFit Games, where you have these athletes working at a high level of intensity in front of these crowds, or movements like this video here, where they're going crazy with a lot of reps, a lot of volume, a lot of speed. But ultimately, just like every other sport, this is the top 1%. Just because you play golf doesn't mean that you're going to be going to the PGA Tour. These guys have been doing it for many, many years, and they are the elite level. And their movements, their workouts, their exercise routine, and their tolerance to discomfort is much different than a normal human being, an everyday person. So if we think about this movement right here, which is one of the foundational movements of CrossFit, it's called a deadlift. You might see this at the games, but you could also see this in your everyday gym and workout routine. So it's very functional. It's a movement where you pick a weight up off the ground. And we do this all the time throughout our daily life. if we have to get something off the ground and carry things up. So you imagine if you had like a basket of laundry that you had to pick up off the ground, that's basically this. That's the deadlift. And if you're doing it with a barbell, you could also do it with jugs of water. So the beauty of CrossFit is that it is infinitely scalable. That the movements that you might see during the CrossFit Games with these high elite athletes, the top 1%, can be translated to the everyday person, because the needs of the athlete and the needs of the couch potato really vary by degree, not by kind. So if we take a look at also this movement here, this is a dynamic vertical pulling motion called the butterfly pull-up, where if we take the premise of doing a lot more work in the small amount of time, we can do a lot more repetitions using momentum and body mechanics that rather than a strict pull-up would allow us to do. But again, this is also scalable. There's ways that you can introduce vertical pulling and have it assisted with a band, or work on negatives, or just jumping up and working on the strength of that movement. So again, infinitely scalable in terms of the movement that we call a pull-up. All right, if you can't do a pull-up, then you can certainly do it in a scaled option. Okay. So just like everything else, everything is scalable when we're trying to do these movements. So let's talk about the risk of injury. So research suggests that CrossFit's injury rate is comparable to other high-intensity sports. So there's a research article study that was published probably like 5 or 6 years ago, maybe even 8 years ago, that looked at 1,000 training hours over a variety of sports. So for every 1,000 training hours, they found that CrossFit resulted in 3.1 injuries over 1,000 training hours. And this was similar to Olympic weightlifting and lower than contact sports like rugby or football. So the risk of injury is low, but there are ways that we can mitigate or reduce the risk of injury. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The most common injured areas for a lot of these CrossFit athletes and also people that practice CrossFit are the shoulder, the lower back, and the knee. And these are usually due to poor movement patterns, poor body mechanics, excessive volume, or lack of proper progression. Okay? So I would say also this is that another risk factor, or something that does increase your risk of injury or CrossFit, are two things. You're either male and you do these workouts unsupervised. So how do we avoid injury? We want to prioritize technique. We want to prioritize the quality of motion, quality of movement, the mechanics, over the intensity and speed. So we have two things, basically. We want to be able to move well, have good mechanics, but we also want to increase the intensity of our workout so that we can have the metabolic and hormonal changes that we get with exercise. If we go too fast or increase the intensity so much so that our mechanics start to break down, those are the things that can increase our risk of injury. So we want to make sure that we prioritize the mechanics first before we start to build the intensity. Another way to avoid injury is to listen to your body. You want to recognize when you are fatigued and these pain signals that might pop up and address them before they escalate. All right? Another thing that you can do is improve mobility. You want to focus on joint mobility and stability to optimize movement mechanics. So in order to move well, you need to have good normal range of motion through your joints, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders. And then you want to progress intelligently, progress smartly. You want to gradually increase the intensity and volume of the exercises based on your ability. And most importantly, I think the biggest thing is to seek professional guidance. A good coach or trainer can help modify these exercises and workouts to fit your individual needs. Because a lot of people are a little intimidated by what they see in these CrossFit gyms as they see other members or people who have been going to the CrossFit gym for years and they're doing a certain movement, certain exercise routine, and they think that that's too aggressive for me. But anyway, a good coach or good trainer will be able to scale those exercises so that you're still having the same workout, the same intensity, but at a level that you can attain. Now, there are functional exercises or functional movements. These are foundational movements that are inherent into what CrossFit is, right? It's functional fitness. You know, we talk about the squat, the deadlift, the press, air squat, push press. We're going to talk about some variations of that as well. And the CrossFit workouts, they fall under these categories. They mix and match things. And so that the dosage gives you that intent of metabolic and hormonal stress onto your body. So let's pull up my other camera here. And let's look at one of the foundational movements called the hinge and squat. So the hinge is basically a deadlift. And a deadlift, we saw the video earlier about picking the weight up off the ground. And there's a couple different variations of that. You can imagine that this is the barbell. And the deadlift is hinging from the hips, keeping the spine stable as we pick the weight up off the ground. So that is a regular conventional deadlift. Another variation that you might encounter with CrossFit classes is a sumo deadlift, where the stance is a lot wider, your grip is a lot more narrow, and the trunk may be more vertical. So this is a good option for people who might have some back issues or have mobility problems with the conventional deadlift. And then another variation is a sumo deadlift high pull, where we continue the movement of the bar up from the ground all the way underneath the chin. So this is a sumo deadlift high pull. And then another variation of a hinge or pulling movement is a medicine ball clean, where we take the same movement of the hip hinge and catch the ball in an upright, what we call the front rack position in the squat. So the clean looks like this, where I come and I use my leg drive to drive the ball off the ground and then quickly bring my hips underneath. So it looks like this. So then I could stand. And I could repeat that again. So it's the hinge and then drive and then catch. So that is a med ball clean. And that leads into an Olympic lift, we should call it clean and jerk. So those are some movements, more advanced movements that you could perform with a barbell or with a weight, a dumbbell. So the other variation is a squat. The squat is very much knee-driven, knee-dominant motion, where the first movement that you get introduced to, your hands are above shoulder height, and then you squat down, keeping the feet flat. The hips go below the knees, and then you come back up. So this is the air squat. Another variation that you might encounter is called the front squat, where we have the barbell across the front part of the chest, and we're squatting down. And another variation is the overhead squat, where the barbell goes over the head and squatting down. So all of that kind of builds on the complexity and the intensity of the movement. So that's the hip hinge and the squat. Let's see if I can pull up another one here. Another exercise routine or a movement pattern is the push and pull. And the shoulder press is a vertical push, and there's a couple different variations with that. So if I have the barbell at chest height and I just push overhead, This is a shoulder press overhead. And then progression of that would be a push press, where instead of just a shoulder press, as the weight gets heavier, I use my legs, bend a little bit, do a little dip, and I use that to drive the weight overhead. So this is a push press, right? Everything goes straight overhead. As the weight gets heavier, we can introduce the push jerk, where you go down and then you drive the weight up, and then before you can completely lock out your elbows, you drop yourself underneath the bar and then redrive with the legs to the top. So it looks like this at speed. So I drive and I stand up. And there's a little bit of shuffling of the feet. So I go to a wider stance when I do that jerk. So I'm here, dip, drive, and then press up. So that's the overhead jerk. So those are a couple movements that we can do with the CrossFit. Let me see here. All right, so, and also there's like compound motions here. Let me pull this up. So compound motions where we start to combine a lot of these movements, so we increase the intensity of the exercise routine. A movement called the thruster is where we combine the overhead press with the squat. So if I have the barbell or the weight or whatever on the front part of my chest, I can go down into a front squat and then drive up and press overhead. So it's a bigger move as I'm squatting and pressing over my head. So that's a compound movement where we start to develop more intensity, and there's more cardiovascular and metabolic load on your body. And it's similar to the sumo deadlift high pull that we did earlier, where it's just a deadlift here, but I'm actually driving and pulling with my arms up. So again, that's a combination of an upright row with the deadlift. Alrighty. So those are things that we can do in our CrossFit classes. All right. So just to summarize, remember that when you're doing a CrossFit class, you want to make sure that you have proper supervision so that you could scale all of the movements and make sure that you're doing things in a safe and good mechanics manner. All right. All right. So everyone, thank you for joining me today. You could look for this and this session and many more on demand on any of the Better Spaces apps. I will be back on Tuesday, March 25th, where we're going to go over understanding and managing tendinitis in athletes. We're going to talk about insights into the causes of tendinitis, particularly in sports, and discuss treatment options and preventative measures. Again, if you have any questions, you could feel free to email me here at paul@par5pt.com or team@betterspaces.com. All right, thanks for coming and be well.